before we pivot and talk about COVID, and we may talk about question 3 and 4 together, I want our listeners to have a baseline of what recruiting was like before COVID and what it before we get into talking about how COVID has changed recruiting. So the first question is, what has the typical journey of a football player been from elementary, high school, wherever you start, to college? And then we want to, once we get a baseline of what the typical journey is, we want to know how COVID has changed the recruiting process just over the last year. So Toliver, you want to start us? What's the typical journey of a football player?
Well, journeys are always, they all are different.
Say that right there. Say it again.
I say journeys are different and they all have some similarities. However, yes. I can only speak of my own journey and my knowledge of what I've seen and what I've seen happen. And really, typically, it starts with understanding who your student athlete is, or your child is, or your whoever. And when you understand that, that's part of life. And so I'm gonna get a little biblical, because if you care anything about life, then you're gonna understand who your kids are from the time they were born till they made 5, till they get to 10, till they go to 15, 25, 35, and so on. So for me, I'm big on life. So I pay attention to my kids, which rightfully so everybody should. So when you see a blessing that God has put on it, and it could be anything, it could be any sports, any profession, it could be music, it could be writing, reading, all of that. When you start seeing those traits, or you start seeing elements of, this is what this kid, it could potentially end up being, providing that you as the parent do your part and spoon feed that. Just like you go from breast milk to bottle milk to jar baby food to table food. So if you're paying attention to your kids, and what they like and what they doing and how they moving, regardless of what you want to do with them, it's about spoon feeding them, getting them involved in certain things in academics in school, getting them involved in certain, things outside of school, because you're trying to figure out, me as a parent, what this kid is going to be. Where is he going? And I'm in charge to make sure that he gets his opportunity. That's what God gave me the strength to do when he was birthed, and when I got married and all those things. So at the end of the day, that's the process. I think the foundation with anybody's child is paying attention to them and spoon feeding what that is. And it's going to explode. So then once you find that out, then you got to start massaging that. You got to start working that. Just like when we change careers and we go from one element to the next, one category to the next. I was in the front office working at one point. Now I'm in the warehouse. I was at the warehouse. Now I'm on the road as a driver. Now I'm a manager of the whole company. Whatever the case is, it's about paying attention, spoon feeding that element of whatever that is that kid has within him, that God's put in him, to get him to the next level. That's the process I took, and what I see that's most important in the scheme of all.
I think that what you just said is so important. That's why I kept telling you, say it again. In our world, part of the lies, I'm not going to be politically correct, and part of the lies is that people, whether it's 7-on-7 coaches, whether it's trainers, they tell kids, if I have the recipe, if you do A, B, C, D, and E, I guarantee that you're going to get a scholarship. And most of the time, the impression is that they're going to get a D1 Power 5 scholarship. That is the biggest lie ever. Everybody has a different journey. commonalities, similarities, like Toliver said, but there's no, if you do A through B or A through Z, I guarantee you that you're going to get a college scholarship. No one can promise a scholarship. Coaches don't even know how many scholarships they can offer. They don't know. They
You
can
go out
anticipate,
looking for positions,
but have no idea. So that piece is is really integral. The uncertainty, the hey, we're going to do these things, but we hope we're going to get what we want, but maybe we're not going to. Like, for me, that's really the typical journey, because I've not seen any two players do the exact same thing and get the exact same result.
well, let me answer that COVID question before I let Angela get in. But that COVID question you asked, yes, it has distorted, interfered in so many different ways. When there's a big challenge like that, and I hear people say it all the time, we got to come together, we got to come together, we got to come together. Okay, now that's the politics all the way down to, the college level. And you say, okay, all right, coaches, now you're faced with, okay, now I'm going to find out about who we really are. Because everything has been pretty good for a while. Now here comes COVID. And now the same thing Angela's going through with a student athlete, I'm going through. It's like they coming in, cleaning house and making room for others because there was a coach's change and because the kid went through something. Now here's COVID. So you're going to blame it on COVID? No, you can't. Your job don't stop. You just can't get out in the streets and do what you've been doing. So what you got to do is pick the phone up and start texting more or emailing or talk more. And now you just got to work different. And that, I'm going to tell you, these last 10 months has shown me so many different things about a lot of college coaches that I know that I'm a bit disappointed. I mean, disappointed.
Very so. Well, I feel like COVID is just an avenue really for them to lie more. So with the athletes that I tend to specialize in, I try to get them early, 9th, 10th grade or whatever. But what I'm noticing, even with my older athletes, is that coaches are even using COVID to say, this is why we ain't offering you. And it's like, what? Like, what are you talking about? They're using COVID as an excuse to not communicate, or to not, again, they may not be able to travel as much, but there's no shortage of offers. Offers are still going out. I'm on Twitter every day. People are posting, blessed to receive an offer from da-da-da-da-da. Offers are still going out. And so I have to tell my parents, do not allow these people to lie to you, and understand if they're lying to you, that just may not be the school for your athlete. It's really okay. Don't you get sucked in and somebody else is interested in your athlete, but y'all are so goo gaga for this school. Because like I said, the schools that want your athlete, they have no problem in throwing that offer out there. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, you don't get caught up in the hoopla and the lies, because trust me, the lies are just so rampant. And COVID is just another excuse. I cannot tell you how many of my parents have said, well, the coach said this because of COVID, but somebody else at the school is going on a virtual junior day, or they've been offered, or this, that, and the other, even at a same position. So they're just using it as another means to lie. But I definitely think that COVID is showing you these coaches' true colors. And like I said, I always felt like it was political. I was into it from the very first offer that my son got. And I started doing my research then. But I think going back to what the whole question was around, you said, James, out of the journey, definitely agree that everybody's journey is different. The two athletes in my house, their journey has been different. But I think for me and my husband, we chose to be intentional. So just like Toliver said, my kids are good at everything. They just exceed at everything they do. So, but once we started picking and kind of honing in and saying, okay, they may not want to get up for basketball, but they waking me up for football. So we started investing more in football. We started doing more things for football. We started rewarding more for football. And in CWP Sports Consulting, I'm the academic coach. So that's the first thing I want to say, parents, that journey should start with them being a student first. I don't think enough parents are, everybody's willing to send them to this camp and send them to this, but are you willing to pay for a tutor? Because little Billy over here is failing math. And math is a foundational type of course. So if they fail in math in 4th grade, baby, when they get to 8th grade, it's going to be a struggle. So I'm always like, listen, I don't want you even to invest with CWP Sports Consulting if your kid doesn't have adequate grades, if they're not taking the correct classes. If, again, a kid can graduate from high school with a degree, go on to play collegiate athletics and be fine. But you know who really succeed and do really, really well at those collegiate, those kids that are taking advanced classes, those kids that are taking honors classes, because it's a more preparation. The preparation is a little bit better for those athletes. I'm not knocking anybody who may not be on that level, because again, you can succeed, but I'm just telling you from my own mouth that it is going to be a lot more difficult. So if you start early, parents, being intentional with your athletes, making sure that they're good students, because the student aspect of it just comes along with the discipline. They're not going to go to college and not be able to get grades. You know what I'm saying? They'll be on probation. They'll be kicked off the team if they can't do the work. And college offers a lot more resources, but when you start out behind the 8 ball, as my grandmama would say, then guess what? It's going to be so much more difficult for them to do it at that collegiate level. So parents, my advice to you on your kids' journey from rec league to high school to college is to make sure that they got that discipline up here first, not just for the sport, but also for their academics. Because as Jamesetta just said, that's another thing I'm struggling with. I'm talking to athletes and I'm like, well, what are you interested in? Football. What else? What are you going to major in? What do you want to do? And then I get these off the wall answers and they're like, oh, I want to be an engineering major. And I'm looking at their math and their science grades. And I'm like, baby, think again. You're not fixing to be no engineering major. You ain't even going to get into an engineering program. And that is my job, though, to be honest with them, to try to help them as a sophomore, as a junior, to try to figure out, hey, if football ends tomorrow, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to have the degree to support it. I'm going to at least be started the degree to support that, because it's so much deeper than the sport, guys. I heard a young man say yesterday that professional athletes, that's not their career. Because when you think about career, you think about longevity. And when you think about the average football player, you're talking 4 years. Come on.
3 years. Yep. 3 years. 3 years. So that's a really great point, because I don't think that parents understand that the recruiting journey it doesn't exist without the classroom. Like, you don't have a recruiting journey without the classroom. So my kids went to private school because when they were in public school, my daughter's teacher said, you need to move her because she's not going to be academically challenged. And because she's not going to be academically challenged, what I have found as an educator, that kids who are bored in class become discipline problems. So when her teacher said, you need to move her, I was like, yeah, whatever. But ultimately it turned out exactly what she said was right. So I had to move my kids to private school because I needed them to be in a place that was academically challenging. Mm-hmm. Having said that, when we got into the private school world, there were kids whose parents didn't understand that you're paying for school. You might want to ensure that your kid is like academically eligible. Like, you're paying. It's not even a free school. You're paying for this. To your point, Angela, there are parents that I know from the private school setting who got so hooked into, well, my kid played football or my kid played insert sport and they have a great football program and we won a state championship. But then when the college coaches came calling, they didn't have the academics to actually pursue collegiate sports. Like, right. There is no journey if you don't have the academic piece. Like, there really isn't. And I don't think that lots of parents understand that. It doesn't matter, like, all the camps, all the 7-on-7, right. All, like, none of that matters if you're not accomplishing what you need to accomplish in the classroom.
I'm going to share this one little piece, Jamesetta, before we get off this subject, but for the life of me, for, I don't know, probably the last 17, 18 years since I've been dealing with youth sports. And I've always told them, I said, there's a correlation between the two, just like the 7-on-7 and the camps and all. I said, if you can't read a playbook, that means you ain't did what you were supposed to do in the classroom. And I used to preach this to my sons every single day. I was like, if you ain't getting it in the classroom, how you gonna master this sport? You gotta learn how to read a playbook. You gotta learn how to read film. You gotta learn how to have attention to detail. You need all of these little things to still play this sport. And I said it, and I'm still saying it today to kids. I'm like, play with them academics if you want. But that's when you're gonna find out when you get to the next level, you can't read film, you can't study film. And that's when you find yourself either out of a scholarship, not an offer, or you on the bench, or you don't get an opportunity because you ain't take care of that classroom. And I don't care if you are a C student or a D student or a B student, A student, you have to apply yourself so that there's a connection and correlation in what you do on that football field.
Yep.
Like people,
absolutely.
Like there's the biggest lie that people ever started was that athletes are dumb. Like no, I'm like, that is the biggest lie. You got a whole 5 year. I'm just saying that's the biggest lie ever. You got a whole 5-year-old out here. He knows how to run a play. Like your 5-year-old can run a freaking.
Listen, my son was 7. Troy was 7, and I'll never forget because I was just really I was I played basketball in high school, so I was a basketball person. And so when my kids start playing, I'm that parent that I am kind of a nerd in that sense. I wanted to learn everything about it. My 7-year-old is telling me about the 2-hole, the 6-hole, and this. So when he was 7 years old though, and Troy has always been very bright, but he was the kid that was getting all these A's, right? But he wasn't being challenged. And so I was intentional, guys, just like my husband was intentional with making sure that they could have the playbook. I was intentional with, oh, you got this playbook, you're going to get this math. Oh, the only grades I paid for in my house was math and science. Still to this day, if you get an A or B in math, you get some money. Other than that, the other subjects don't even matter to me to push them. And I am a science person, but I'm just saying, like at 7, I knew, I'm like, oh, if he can get this, and then he was quoting stats for players and stuff. I'm like, oh no, this boy needs to be pushed on ahead. I had to fight with his teachers because his teachers were like, oh, but he's such a great athlete. Oh no, baby, he's a student. And he's going to be a student. And if I have to cuss you out again, we're going to bump him on up in this class, and he's going to take this class and this class because I said so. And now again, the A's slowed down, but he was learning so much more. And like I said, college for him was a no-brainer because guess what? He had all the resources. He could get the help with his papers, this, that, and the other. But all of that started at 6 and 7. It didn't start when he was 18. It didn't start when he got to high school. It was, okay, you don't get this grade, you don't play on Friday nights. And I did not play. Me and my husband had a couple of powwows about that. And I know some parents might be in that situation, but it was a no, because my husband struggled at the collegiate level because his academics wasn't on point, because he was praised so much about what type of great football player he was, what type of great wrestler he was. No, my young men were going to be complete men. They were going to be the student and they were going to be the athlete. And today they can be businessmen because we were intentional with getting them to do those types of things. Trust me, parents, you will be surprised if you dangle that, oh, you ain't playing if you don't do this, what they'll do.
Oh yeah. I've seen it happen a lot, but I'm gonna go on the record though. I'm still in that word, intentions, even though it may be small, normal to you, Angela, but I'm still in that word because I got to be able to explain myself much better as I learn.
There you go. Be intentional, parents. Really. I mean, you have to on both sides of it. Be please.
Got you, because it's really funny that you're talking about like how somebody's perceived, because the private school I chose for my kids, they didn't make it, you had to do the work. You didn't get to say, oh, I had a football game, I had a basketball game, or I played whatever. There were no exceptions. You had to do the work. And then when my son got to the academy, so we went from Battleground Academy to the Air Force Academy. When he got to the academy, they really weren't making any exceptions. You had your academics, you had your military stuff, and it was like, football, you're gonna do that too. that set him up for success. The things that we did in middle school and high school and elementary school, like parents understanding that your kid can learn. They're brilliant. You just don't recognize how brilliant they are, and being extremely intentional, looking at your 5-year-old, your 6-year-old, your 7-year-old, saying, they're running plays. They can digest stats. They know all the Pokemon people. They know all the move. Like, hello, that's the biggest sign of intelligence. And then acting like they have the ability to learn, and building on that foundation so that as you go forward. I've never met a door. I've never, ever seen a door closed on somebody because they excelled in the classroom. I don't know anybody who's ever had a door slammed in their face because they were smart. Not one. It's Absolutely. It's super important for us to realize, like, that academics, every athletic journey is different. Some of us will play 7-on-7. Some of us won't. Some of us will do multiple sports. Some of us won't. But the one thing they have in common is they all had to be academically eligible, and they all had to meet the admissions requirements of their respective schools. Absolutely. That is the one thing that's 100%. And to go back to our question, one of the things, like Toliver, you hit on this, but one of the things that I've noticed that COVID has changed about the journey is who I did a post about this. Most parents don't understand who their competition is. Like, you have a whole group of college athletes that get to return back to school. And so, like, I'm quite sure. So, like, Devontae Smith is not a senior. He's going to go to the league, but he's not a senior. I'm quite sure that if he said, hey, Coach Saban, I want to come back and play again, he's got a spot, which means your kid doesn't. Like, understanding.
But Devontae graduated.
Yeah, but I'm just saying he has an extra year of eligibility, though. They all do.
Okay. I thought you meant like he's not a senior, and but he graduated. He was actually working on his master's, I think.
So, like, some of like they could come back and they could still play another year. So that makes a difference to what Angela and Toliver were saying about coaches being truthful and being honest. So you need to recognize that they have an option of bringing all their existing players back who they know the playbook. They know their production. They know whether or not they can succeed in the classroom or not. But they have the option of accepting transfers or letting people go.
Yep.
And one of the ways they're going to let people go is they're going to let young men get into that transfer portal. And if you look, a lot of people that go in the portal, if they've done things the right way, they getting picked up within a week. Part of your COVID has made it such that a part of your competition is the existing athlete, and it's in a way that it never has been before, because never before have they been able to immediately transfer and play. Never before have they all been able to come back. Like, that's very different. And
Jamesetta, so just to go back into the COVID thing, I'm advising a parent right now at the collegiate level where her son does want to come back, and he's almost being pushed out. So understand that too. It's I emphasize with any of my parents that the relationship with your high school coaches, collegiate coaches, it is very important that those don't go south. Sometimes you can't help it, and I get that, but understanding that a player who has done everything right, or this, that, and the other, who may not have been problematic and has done the grades and has done the academics and things like that, they have a better chance of being allowed to stick around. But in this particular case, and I can't name names or talk about it specifically though, but they're trying to push her son out. Her son is a senior, and that is where the problem comes in at too. Like, I think, and I'm not really certain on the particulars, James, that you can comment on that, but what the wording of the NCAA, but when it's a senior, I think what she's being told is that it is counting against their scholarships or something like that. And so basically this coach has basically told this young man that he wants him to leave and not hang around and not use his extra year and so on and so forth, because he wants to use that scholarship on someone else, and not in those exact words, but basically the writing is on the wall. And so parents have to understand that as well. And so I tried to make sure that I didn't, be in bad standings. But all I'm saying is that when these young men are 19, 20, 21, like I said, they don't get the same respect as mama calling per se, or as mama trying to go to the AD and seek some answers and things of that nature. Because I will do that in a minute. If I got a question, somebody gonna give me some answers, especially if you're avoiding my calls or not answering me and those sorts of things. But understanding that this whole everybody gets another extra year, it ain't a pretty thing. I don't care how you spin it. I don't care how they say it don't matter. It's not a pretty thing for all athletes. Know that.
Yep, you're right.
That's so true.
Because they don't get it. They only get 85 scholarships. The NCAA hasn't said you get 95. So that's why I'm telling my high school parents, these are your competitors. Because to your point, Angela, relationships are super important, because this is what I know for a fact. If you maintain a relationship, even when the coach no longer wants you, they will find a place for you to go. They will pick up the phone and find a coach at a different school and say, I got this kid. He doesn't suit me, whatever. Might even be there's myriad. I've seen coaches, even when it was a disciplinary issue, find a home for the new kid. But what they will do, if you maintain the appropriate relationship and ask the right questions, they'll find your kid a new place. And that's a perfect example of what you're talking about when you say politics, because it varies. Everybody has a different experience. So people do need to know that COVID has, like, your competition in this world is extremely different. It's very, very different. It's not who it needs to be, because they don't have an extra 10 scholarship slots yet. They still have the same amount that they had before. So that means that, like, I've had conversations with coaches. Like, some coaches are very honest in saying, hey, we know we're going to get some transfers, so we're holding a certain amount of slots because we're going to look for transfers, and we have kids that are returning. So the number of kids that I talked to coaches, they're like, we're offering one high school kid, one, because the rest of my slots are people that are returning or they're transfers. High school parents really need.
And guess what, Jamesetta? They're trying to sustain winning. They keep their job.
Right.
So that's why they changed that paradigm, man. They are not going to slow up because of COVID. They got to find a way to fill them stands again, because you're not getting them filled. You didn't get them filled this year, or you didn't even have a season this year. So the business part of it, we got to win.
Yeah, because I talked to some people who were surprised. Like, I don't even know where people got this from, but they were surprised that college coaches got fired this year. I was like, the business of football? Oh, if you don't get the W's, you finna go somewhere. Just because COVID happened.
You ain't got to go home, but you got to get out of here.
Right. I saw a coach like do a whole rant because he said this was a free year. Like, free for who? It's never been free for you. Never. Nope. They will cut. Football is big business, and if you are a bad business decision, they will move on.